Hi, my name is Jared Mello, and this is an episode of Everything Eccentric. And as you can see, I have a guest with me today. His name is Ian Smith. He's co-owner of the Atilis Gym here in Bellmawr, New Jersey. And I want to talk to him about this whole fiasco that's happened ever since COVID had started. And he mentioned it was March 16th. But how you doing today, Ian?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. So why don't you go from the beginning here and talk about what happened from the time that COVID really came about, and then what Murphy has done to you. Murphy's the governor of New Jersey, for those of you who don't know.
So late February, you started to hear about the looming threat of COVID. And the news started to pick it up, and the fear-mongering kind of kicked in, and I don't think anybody really knew what to think at that point. I think a lot of people were really scared. A lot of people certainly didn't know what to do. But we were kind of skeptical early on, and we had heard whispers that there was this big shutdown coming, and there was going to be a nationwide lockdown, and but we kept going business as usual. And on March 16th, Governor Murphy issued the shutdown for pretty much all small businesses. He made a distinction between essential and non-essential things, and most businesses fell under that non-essential category, and gyms were one of them. So on March 16th at 8 p.m., all non-essential businesses were ordered to close their doors, and the gym was one of them. At the time, can't say that we were excited by the idea, but it was one of those things where your country's asking something of you, and sometimes you got to sacrifice for the greater good. So we shut down. But Frank and I never stopped working from day one. We were right back here the next day because we knew that at some point we were going to reopen, and we were going to be reopening to a very different business landscape, that we were going to have to take in new considerations in order to keep our members safe, in this COVID kind of environment. So that was it. We shut down, and then on 11 days into the shutdown, the United States federal government passed a $2.4 or $2.3 trillion spending bill, and that was a big red flag for us. Why they started to give $600 a week extra unemployment money for 16 weeks when they were asking for 14 days to flatten the curve really started to kind of raise our suspicions. If you're talking about a virus with a 14-day incubation period, why are you planning on having people sitting at home 16 weeks out? So that was when we started really, I guess, to kind of smell smoke and suspect that there was fire, and that this thing was going to be a political battle, much less than it was going to be an issue about public health. So we continued to come here and work. We started social distancing the facility from day one. We started moving equipment around. We were researching the virus of it itself. We were doing our homework, making sure that we understood the latest, not just listening to the news, but looking at the studies on how it was transmitted, who was most at risk, how to mitigate those things, researching cleaning products, everything, because we knew that eventually we were going to reopen and that we would have to take these things into mind. 14 days turned into a month very quickly turned into 2. And right about at the 2-month mark, Frank and I looked at each other and we said, all right, enough is enough. There was no plan put in place. These small business loans and grants and forgivable loans that they were talking about were laughable at best.
Did you get anything from the government at all via small business loans, help at all?
Not a penny. No. They were laughable at best, and non-existent in most cases. The nature of how those loans work is banks don't want to loan my gym $25,000. They want to go to a car dealership that needs $10 million. And that's just the nature of it. That's not necessarily something that's out of malice. That's something that that's just kind of the way that it works. And there's no getting around that. And there's no opportunity for small businesses to get that. So all the true small businesses were left out in the cold.
Right.
Meanwhile, you have major sports teams, multi-million-dollar restaurants, chains like Ruth Chris, the Lakers, I think, got these small business loans, and it's these are the people that don't need them.
Right. Corporations have always been the ones that have been able to take advantage of this. The government did give them $6 trillion, I think, is what it was, and I think between the governments and the banks, there needed to be more stipulations on who was able to get that money. There's no reason why LA Lakers need to get that money. There's no reason why even someone like Robert De Niro was able to get millions of dollars for restaurants in New York. If anyone needs it, it wasn't the LA Lakers.
It
wasn't Robert De Niro.
It's your local hair salon. It's your your local gym. It's your local nail salon. It's all these other places. Your local clothing boutiques, stuff like that. So at that point, frustration had really started to kick in, and it was very clear that the government did not have our best interests in mind, or at least some people in government didn't. So without a plan, we were 7 weeks into it. There was no plan presented, no talks about reopening. So Frank and I put together our own plan, and we put that plan together with a lot of thought. And on a week before May 18th, so May 11th, something like that, we made an announcement publicly. We contacted the local police department. We contacted the mayor. We said, hey, next week we're opening. We have a plan. Here's what it looks like. We took the social media. We put it on the Atilis social media. We put it on my social media. And I made an 8-minute video kind of explaining the who, what, where, and why. Why we were reopening, what our plan was, and how we were going to execute it. And I think it was really the right message at the right time, because a lot of people really stuck to it, and it generated a lot of excitement. The next day, we were contacted by the Rich Zioli Show, which is a local radio show, and he wanted to talk to us about it. And then later that day, Tucker Carlson called us and said, hey, can you be on the show tonight? And I said, absolutely. And that was really where the can of gas hit the fire.
Sure.
And that was the point of no return. Tucker said it on the air. He said, you're openly defying your government. And he said, are you ready to do this? And we said, absolutely. So that was kind of the start of it all. The following week on Monday, May 18th, we opened our doors to a crowd out here of a couple hundred supporters, the entire national and local media. We had an interview right here with Pete Hegseth the morning that we opened. And we had a line wrapped down around the building of all of our members. We still have the red X's on the ground for social distancing. We had a line wrapped all the way down around the building. And we opened. And the police were here for most of the day. They had nothing to say, or they were just kind of here making sure things went well. We executed our 15-point safety protocol, and we resumed business. At some point in the day, around like 11:30, the cops walked up and they requested to speak to us, and the crowd kind of got a little upset, and we quieted the crowd down, and there was that moment that we captured that kind of went viral where the police chief or the captain said, you're all formally in violation of an executive order, and he took a long pause and he said, on that night, have a nice day.
I saw that.
And he walked away, and the crowd sort of erupted, and it was this beautiful moment where we felt like we had made our stand. And 15 minutes later, the lieutenant came back after being forced by Murphy. The Bellmawr police were threatened that he was going to furlough the entire department and bring in the county if they did not act. So they started writing us citations that day. We continued business. Let's speed it up a little bit. Tuesday, we got citations. Members got arrested. Members got citations. Wednesday, they set up cameras in the parking lot. They were pulling people over down the road, hitting them with all sorts of charges, trying to scare them away from coming. They stopped.
Very tyrannical.
Yeah, it's a weaponization of a public organization that is designed to protect the public, not to enforce the will of a governor who is making executive orders and sort of doing what he pleases. That's not the police department isn't his personal sort of enforcement service. But their hands were being forced, so we continued to push back. On Wednesday, in a press conference, he said he was going to use the health department against us. And somewhere right up there, Wednesday night in the middle of the night, a health department official came and slapped that sticker on the window and said that we were shut down. via the health department. Nobody ever stepped foot inside of our building. Nobody ever contacted us. Nobody even took a look at our plan. They just said, you're closed because coronavirus. So that was his second weaponization of a public organization against us. Again, the health department is there to ensure that places are safe,
right,
and to protect the public, but they were just being used to enforce Murphy's will. We ignored that because it was nonsense, and we reopened. And on Friday, late in the afternoon, he went to a judge who is sort of his lapdog judge here in Jersey, Judge Robert Lugie, and he got a judge to issue a court order to enforce the shutdown of the health department. So at that point, they had our locks physically changed on us Friday night. They literally came, broke our locks, and locked us out of our own private property. Speeded up, about 3 weeks later, we got those locks removed because we have an essential business inside. We have a nutrition store. And then from that point, we started to resume operations outside. We were dragging about 45,000 pounds worth of equipment and machinery outside every day. We called it the AMAZ, the Anti-Murphy Autonomous Zone. And that lasted for a while, but it was truly killing us. It was 90-some degrees outside. A lot of our members, can't work out in that heat.
Right.
We have a very wide range of people who come here, and a lot of them are, 55 plus, and sitting on blacktop, in the baking summer sun.
What did Murphy tell you guys, though, in regards of like getting no money, getting no help, and not being able to open? And that's it.
Be patient. Yeah.
And
that was his sort of theme all the way through. He was just telling, be patient, be patient, be patient. When you're worth $60 million.
It's easy for them to be patient.
Very easy. I'm sure not one night through all of this did Murphy lay his head on his pillow and have anxiety or fear of what tomorrow would bring.
Right. They got to do something for the people.
Millions of New Jerseyans and millions of Americans around the country were crippled with fear, anxiety, and just an overall sense of not knowing what tomorrow would bring with these shutdowns. And the politicians who still make their money, still get their paychecks, and are all worth millions of dollars, they tell us to be patient. It's really easy when your primary mode of transportation is a helicopter, and it's hypocrisy at its finest, and it's this idea, that these people are elected officials. They are not rulers. And they are by no means above us, but they certainly act like it.
Supposed to be public servants is what
they
they're
are supposed to be public servants, and I think at some point along the way, these people who get into politics as a career start to get that really confused, and they start to feel like, first of all, whatever they say is how it goes, and that's not how it works.
Right.
You don't get to just say, "Hey, you're shut down," because I said so. They never once provided a shred of evidence that showed that small businesses were a threat to the public any more so than anything else was. Walmart, going to work at some financial institution, all these places. They never. All they do is make these conclusionary statements, and then say something like, science and data behind it, but there's never any science and data presented. If you could truly, and that's a violation of due process. That's no different than if I came to your house and searched your house and said, I'm searching it because I think you have something. Well, no, what proof do you have? And that's kind of our legal battle moving forward, is that they've never.
I agree with that too. So if Walmarts and Home Depots and Lowe's can open, I feel like a gym should be able to open too. And I've noticed that corporations, they always got the leg up. They got what they wanted, unless they're the airline industry. Every other corporation, they find a way through, or they get bailed out. It's the little man, whether it's a server or a bartender or a small business owner, they're the ones that get clowned. And that's why they said 40% of small businesses were shut down after 6 months if nothing changed. And that's the thing, nothing really changed.
No, and it's... the original forecast was that 2.2 million people would be dead by summer. That was the original forecast.
Was it really? Okay.
Yeah, that's what Dr. Fauci said. 2.2 million people would be dead. And in the beginning, they showed us these videos of China where people were dropping dead in the streets and, stacks of body bags. And it's like, that never happened. But they're still treating this as if that's the case. And if that was the case, it would be very different. If people were dropping dead in the streets and this virus was what they said it was or what they sold it as via the media in the beginning, I think a lot of people would reconsider their position on the shutdown.
I mean, I think the virus is real, but 94% of the deaths, they occur from people that had some other comorbidity. So it's like the straw that broke the camel's back for them.
It is.
But that leaves only 6%.
That's an absolute shame in and of itself. Nobody should make light of that.
Right.
But the reality is that death is a part of life, and that this is something that's going to happen over and over again. Viruses and bacteria and other threats to humanity have been around far longer than humans have.
Right.
We've been having issues with this stuff since as long as anybody can remember. Viruses and bacteria are not going to go away. And after COVID, there will be something else. And before COVID, there was something else. You can't just shut down the world every time something comes. That's not a sensible public health policy. And I invite these politicians, especially these ones that advocate for these strong lockdowns, put your public health policy on the table and prove it to me. Show it to me, explain it to me. And I guarantee you can't, because everything that they do goes against the basic tenets of public health. Putting on a mask and isolating yourself and disinfecting the entire world around you is not public health. Vaccines are not public health. Public health starts with the individual, and it starts with individual health. Teaching people how to be healthy, advocating for people to be healthy.
And that's why gyms are important.
That's why gyms are important. And that's why a lot of places are important. You can't tell somebody that it's not essential for them to take care of themselves.
AA, NA for people that need to go to self-help stuff. That was huge for
all
them.
Of these things are public health is a very complex issue, and it doesn't start and end with COVID. And all of a sudden, it has. It's not this one-dimensional entity where COVID is the only threat to life. We have a gym full of recovering addicts. We have a gym full of men and women that have served their country both domestically and abroad. Who struggle with real internal pressure from the things that they've seen or the things that they've had to do. We have a gym full of people who just have stressful jobs. Who just have stressful lives. We have a bunch of nurses who work in these critical care units in Camden and in Pennsylvania and all around in these hospitals where they're asked to do a lot, and it's important that they be able to take care of themselves. And I think that was the
so even criticism. The nurses were for you guys being open too. That's a big one.
Almost everybody, unanimously. And we have a very wide range of people that come here, and that's kind of what makes our gym is that everybody's united under this one principle of coming here, getting healthy, working hard, and treating their bodies with respect. We have every race, every background that you could possibly think of, every career in here, every person from every walk of life. And everybody comes here for the same reason, and it's to better themselves, to feel better, and to operate or to function better as a human being.
I mean, I think in no small part, a lot of this fiasco was because they are just trying to make Trump look bad in any way possible. Now, I don't think that's completely it, but I think that's a lot of it. And say if Biden were to win in November, I would not be surprised in the slightest if there's a huge tone change about everything regarding the virus. And I'm actually afraid what would happen if Trump wins. I'm afraid they're going to try to ramp it back up again and say, "Oh, see, we're on the brink of disaster again."
Well, they've just the other day they announced that it's no longer necessary to require to test asymptomatic people, and that's a major shift.
They said that?
It's a major shift in what they said.
Wow,
in the beginning of this, asymptomatic people were the big threat.
Yes.
And then it came out that asymptomatic people don't really transmit the virus in the capacity that they originally said.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a study out of PubMed.gov, I believe the study. 455 people of all ages, backgrounds, different variations in their health were exposed to an asymptomatic COVID-positive person for 5 days. Not a single person walked away from that study infected. Now, does that mean that there's a 0% infection rate? Of course not. But that was their big thing was, you never know who you could give it to, and that's just not the case. So, but now they've said that, and then after that, it was, oh well, we got to test the asymptomatic people. You got to test everybody because they wanted the cases high. And now they've backed off of that. Why? Because it's very likely come October, they're going to ramp up that testing again, and they're going to give themselves that spike that they want. They're always forecasting this second wave, this big spike, and they're creating, they're fulfilling their own prophecies. So it is political, and it's anybody at this point who doesn't see that is either willfully ignorant to it, or just they've fallen victim to media sort of brainwashing.
I mean, I think that the majority of people are going to be okay, and you see that with the college kids that they're getting it, but it's not going to be fatal for them. It might be fatal to someone they can give it to, perhaps. That's part of that 94% of having another comorbidity, but for the most part, they're going to be fine. I think we do need to work on herd immunity. We do need to work on just getting life back to a somewhat normal. And they'll all say things like, there will be no more normal. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a scary thought.
I mean, it is. It is political. Whether it started out as a political thing or not, it is. When you look around the country and you look at the policies that are being put in place, whether on the state level or the local level, everybody who hates Trump wants the country locked down. And it's very hard, and I consider myself pretty independent. I zigzag across the board.
Right.
I'm super pro-gun, but I'm also pro-choice. I'm very much free market, but I like the idea of having social safety nets. So I zigzag down the center. But when you're looking at one side and all they care about and all they talk about is Trump, how bad he is, he's the devil, we got to get him out. And then their policies you start looking at them, and their policies are all aimed to undo the things that he's done. And he's created this great economy where we have the lowest unemployment levels across all demographics that we've ever had. We have one of the strongest economies. Is it perfect? No, but we've had a pretty good run over the past 3 years, and here comes this election, and they've thrown everything else at him. They've thrown scandal after scandal at him, and every single one of them turns out to be wrong.
Teflon Don, that's why they say.
And it's to the point where it's so obvious, and I think that people are really starting to smell the BS. I talk to a lot of people. Like I said, we have a wide range of people here. And we have a lot of people who have been lifelong Democrats who are looking at where the Democrats are leading this country or trying to lead this country, and they're saying, I can't get on board with this. A lot of older people. I had a discussion with a woman this morning. She comes in at 5 o'clock. She's like 77 years old, sweetest old lady ever. And she said that she was a lifelong Democrat, but that she doesn't recognize who these people are. She remembers the Democrats of JFK.
Much different.
Moderate, sensible Democrats, and they've lost that. And I think that they're losing touch with the American people. And I think that the American people are starting to look at what's going on and just not being able to get on board with a lot of these policies. And I think that the lockdown was an overplay of their hands because it started to affect their own voting bloc, because they're decimating the middle and the lower class, the socioeconomic middle and lower class of America. And it doesn't matter, what your beliefs are outside of that, whether you're, all the other issues that people bicker about. If you can't provide for your family, nothing else matters.
You need more government reliance is what you need, and that's kind of, I think, what they're shooting for.
It
also saw
absolutely
the hypocrisy of what they were saying about the BLM riots and protests, etc. Mm-hmm. They were against any sort of gatherings, against anything opening, until that happened. And that was kind of a good illustration of the hypocrisy, that if you agree with what they agree with, it's okay.
You have to be morally consistent.
And that's what people point to.
I support the right of anybody to protest. You know what I mean? I don't care what the protest is about. That's what this country was founded on, free speech. That's rule number one of this country, free speech and the ability to exercise it. And that's something that a lot of the world has never even got to experience that. So it's really important that even though we don't disagree, we don't always agree with the other person speaking, that we protect not only our right to speak freely, but others.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to the BLM movement, when it comes to any other movement that I'm not necessarily, a part of, I respect their right to protest. But you better damn well respect mine. And these politicians are playing favorites because one form of protest is against them and the other is for them. And you have to be consistent. You don't pick and choose when to allow or when people have their rights. People have their rights, period.
That's what people get annoyed by. They get annoyed by the inconsistency.
The inconsistency and the hypocrisy of it. Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's and then on top of that, people get frustrated when they speak out against it. They're shamed for it.
There's a lot of that going on.
And people are sick and tired of it. People are really, really sick and tired of being, this mob rule where you get attacked, and we got attacked. And it's such hypocrisy. But it's so clearly hypocrisy. That you can't even really get upset about it because it's so absurd. It's so absurd.
One of the things you've been able to do, though, is you made yourself a PMA, I heard, and you've also made yourself a headquarters for, I guess it was Rick Maida, the senator candidate in New Jersey here.
Yep, so we were a PMA, and Governor Murphy totally ignored it. Which is, just add that to the list of constitutional violations. When this is all said and done, Murphy is going to have his hands full with a lot of lawsuits, not only from us, but from a lot of other people. And that's all well and good. You want to step in a big pile of shit, you go right ahead. Because when this stuff gets in front of a judge who actually respects the Constitution, not some lapdog judge like Robert Luggie, who yes sir, no sirs, Governor Murphy's every whim, it's going to get smashed. Because a judge that will respect the Constitution, a true judge, a fair and impartial judge, not a state level judge, will look at this and say, no, you're wrong. And that's what's given us the confidence to go all the way through this, is that we know we're on the right side of this. So do whatever you want in the meantime. Threaten me with fine. We have $250,000 worth of fines. We have 60 criminal charges at this point. We've lost our business license. We've had our personal financial records subpoenaed. Our family's personal financial records subpoenaed. We've been threatened with long-term imprisonment. And that's a classic big guy versus little guy scenario.
I mean, of all the things for Murphy to be worried about, I would think your gym here should be pretty low on his list. If I'm Murphy, I think to myself, it's my responsibility to take care of the people under me. It's my responsibility that they're able to feed their families, pay their bills. And that should be my number one thought. Instead, what I see him do all too often is he'll blame Mitch McConnell. He'll blame Donald Trump and say we can't afford the 25% extra that would cost us for unemployment. So yeah, unemployment's federal, but it's like, people don't want to hear that. People want to hear, let's get some results. And that's what they're interested in, get results.
And there was once upon a time there was a time when politicians worked together. You know what I mean? Because it didn't matter what team you were on, whether you were red or blue or whatever, you remembered that your job was to serve the American people. And you put your differences aside, and you came to the table and you discussed your differences and found a common ground. And I think that a lot of politicians, and not just on the left, that by no means is this purely an issue with the left.
To me, they're both guilty.
They are. They've both lost their way, and they truly forget what their job is. And their job is to be a public servant, to serve the people. And I think in a best case scenario, a lot of these people are selfish. And in a worst case scenario, I think a lot of these people have bad intentions.
Well, I think a lot of their intentions are just to stay in power, no matter what, and to become a career politician, which is why term limits would be a good thing. But overall, though, for your gym here, where have they left it? Have they started leaving you alone now that you become a headquarters, or what's happened?
Now it's Murphy's throwing his punches, kind of behind the scenes legally. He can't shut us down. once we declared that we were a rally house and a volunteer location for Rick Maida, he opened the gym 2 days later. So he can't quite punish us in the same way, but now he's ramped up. Like I said, we got financial subpoenas. My own mother got one. Frank's wife got one where they have to go testify about our personal finances because Murphy really thinks that we're going to pay him $250,000. And that's just not happening.
No. I mean, it's scary to think that if you just get on the wrong side of the wrong person, this is the lengths they'll go to make your life miserable and to try to ruin you, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's where people who maybe disagree with you, that's what they have to understand, where all it's going to take is the wrong person in power, and the same thing could happen to them, just for a different reason.
And I think a lot of people realize that, because we've had a lot of support. We've had growing support through all this. A lot of people in the beginning had a guy come in. I tell this story quite frequently, but had a guy come in about 3 weeks ago or so, and he bought a T-shirt, and I thanked him, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "When this all started, I thought you and Frank were assholes." Dead serious. And I laughed, and he said, "Seriously?" He said, "I thought you were selfish, I thought you were reckless, and I thought you guys were just doing this to be defiant." He said, "The only reason that I followed your story was because you really pissed me off." And he said, "I trash talked you online, he said, I didn't like you guys." He said, "But as I followed the story and as I watched what Murphy did to you and the lengths that he went, and how you guys never changed your position through any of this," he said, you won me over. He said, "I'm here today to show support. I'm here today to apologize. I'm here today to tell you that, I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I don't agree with anything that these people are doing to you, and so and that's just common sense, because he's watching what's happening to, we're not forcing anybody to come here. We've had 37,000 visits to the facility as of this morning, and not a single case of COVID.
That's pretty impressive.
We've had a consulting group of scientists, an epidemiologist, a virologist, and a couple others come into the facility. They did a full inspection, not only of our safety protocol, but how we actually roll it out. And they wrote a 5-page report on it. And they said this is one of the safest places they've ever stepped foot in.
Good.
To the point that they didn't even wear masks inside, and their company mandates that they do. And in the report, the conclusion of the report is that this place is so safe that you don't need to wear a mask. And we publish those records publicly, or we publish that report publicly.
If people don't have it, people don't have it. And I feel like that's the risk, is when people do have it. Like, I can understand wearing masks indoors in other places. I know you don't agree with that. Mm-hmm. But I can see them doing that. That's more okay to me. But outside, they've said the virus is killed by sunlight. Virus, it does not survive outside very long. So
almost everything that they initially said about the virus turned out to be false. The death rate, way false. The fact that asymptomatic people were just walking around infecting everybody, very false. The fact that it stayed on surfaces for...
Oh yeah, they said days to weeks.
It doesn't even stay on for hours.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you clean stuff, we have disinfectant that kills that is proven to kill the coronavirus in less than 30 seconds on surfaces. It's the plan that we put forth publicly in hopes that the government would come to us and say, hold off on opening, let's see what you got. And to date, nobody has reached out. Not Murphy, not the health department, nobody. Only for punitive measures. And if that doesn't get your spidey senses tingling that something is up, then I don't know what does.
I think we're starting to see the results now. We've seen all of these small businesses close. A lot of restaurants are closing. They're never going to come back. And part of me thinks that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted corporations to absorb all the business from smaller businesses.
It's a consolidation of wealth. It's a consolidation of power. The one thing about small businesses that I don't think a lot of people realize, so this shopping center is filled pretty much with small businesses, with the exception of Dollar General, I guess. I think that's a franchise anyway, so that would be considered a small business. So when people come to the shopping center and they buy a gym membership, or they buy a bagel, or they're at the daycare right there, or they go to the pizza shop, or the nail salon, or the hair salon, or the laundromat, the money that they spend there stays in the community, and it stays in Bellmawr, it stays in the surrounding towns, it stays in South Jersey and Philadelphia. And that money goes into my pockets, and I put that money back into my business, and I put that money back into other local businesses, other small businesses. The auto mechanic down the street, they work on my piece of junk car right there. That money stays in the community, and it flows back and forth between people. As these small businesses close, instead of shopping at the local grocery store, I now go shop at Walmart. My dollars that go into Walmart never make it back to Bellmawr.
Never.
They're
going
gone.
to Mr. Walton.
They're gone. They go into the hands of very rich people. Yeah, sure, people make their paychecks and stuff like that, but, that's inconsequential. Most of the money gets funneled out of the community into the hands of very powerful people who have no interest in preserving these beautiful small communities. I love this town. I'm not from here. I live up the road a little bit, but this is a beautiful place filled with awesome people. Right. But as that money gets siphoned out of the community into the hands of lobbyists and corporate executives and politicians, because they're all getting a cut from it, it never returns to the community. And I think that's a really, really scary thing that a lot of people don't necessarily consider.
And what's the reason? They go there. They go there because a lot of them offer lower prices than a small business. And that's why I try to emphasize to people, spend a little more money, even if you have to spend locally, because when you give money to the corporation, like you're saying, this goes to Mr. Walton's bank account for Walmart. And it doesn't help anyone.
It doesn't stay in the community, and it's important. You see communities where stuff like this has already happened, right? Where small businesses die out, where industries die out. You see a lot of it in old mining towns and towns in the Midwest that used to do textiles and whatever. I mean, there's
dead towns now.
There's a million examples, and that's exactly it. Or you see it. Look at right here, the city of Camden. The city of Camden was once a thriving city. It's a beautiful city. Look at some of the architecture in Camden. Those brownstone buildings are the same ones that you see up in New York City. I mean, they're beautiful because Camden used to be a major port city. And there was a thriving textile industry there as well. And as that got pulled out, the community collapses around it. And there's no money in the community anymore. It's all government subsidized money for the most part, and black market money. And there's a few small businesses, but most of the stores in Camden are your Wawas and stuff like that. But there's no money being pumped into those communities by the people. There's money being pumped in by the government, but that money, it's not the same as when it's in the hands of you and I, and you own a grocery store and I own a hair salon, and people are paying you, and you're paying workers that live in the community, and you're putting money into your house and stuff like that. The money keeps the community alive and keeps it thriving.
Right.
And what you're seeing is a mass exodus of funding in communities because these small businesses are dying.
I mean, corporations, to me, they're basically an extension of the government, right? And corporations have the money to spend on lobbyists to get what they want in Washington off of K Street.
That's why they were never closed down to begin with.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. Taxation without representation, to me, should mean, unless you have a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., trying to vie for your interests and try to help you out, it's like you don't have representation anymore. Mm-hmm. You're nothing. And who's the small business representation right now in Washington? No one. Mm-hmm. You can't even say the Democrats are that anymore. They used to be the party for the people, but not more.
Once upon a time they were, but yeah, not so much anymore.
No, so no one's helping the little man anywhere. And I think all they want is for corporations to be bigger and to have more power, and for government to be bigger and to have more power.
Because they cooperate at this point. You see it with these big tech companies, like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. They're basically the extensions of the government. They do the government's bidding, or the government does their bidding, and that's a scary situation, especially as that grows and grows and grows. You wind up in a 1984 kind of situation where there's all of the power consolidated in a very select group of people at the top, and everybody underneath is kind of in the same boat, and you get this widening gap. You get two things. You get a widening gap between the upper echelons of society and the lower echelons of society, but then you get this disappearance of the middle class.
Sure.
And you see that in countries like, when I traveled to Brazil, I spent several weeks in Brazil, and that's what you see. There's a very select few who are very powerful and very wealthy, and most everybody else, there almost isn't a middle class. It's the haves and the have-nots.
Sure.
And one of the things about the American dream is that there's that ability for social mobility. You can start anywhere, and work your way up. And the middle class is that place where that's done. That's how you get out of the throes of poverty, is you work your way up into the middle class. Right. And then from the middle class, you begin to work your way up into a place where you're financially comfortable. Not everybody wants to be rich or needs to be rich, but the middle class is a place where most people should be. And once upon a time, that's where the majority of the country was. And you're seeing that middle class shrink and that lower class grow. And as that middle class starts to disappear, you're not able to get to that.
Corporations are a big reason for that. Because
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people at the top of corporations, or a small group at the top, and then there's a lot of people 50,000 and less. And that's not even middle class anymore, 50,000 or less. It's like,
that's not New
it doesn't
Jersey,
go far
at
in New
least.
Jersey. But this is why I was impressed before with Apple, when they refused to actually give the government a back door into their cell phones. Because this is a big example of what they can do, governmental overreach, where they use a rule for something different, like the Patriot Act. And a lot of times they use the Patriot Act for what? To go against low-level drug dealers. Not what they said they were going to do it for, but
Terrorists,
for something different. And that's where a lot of these things right now that can happen because of the virus, they can creep down the line into other things. And that's my fear.
Today's a reminder of it, because today is 9/11.
Right.
And you had this horrible occurrence on 9/11 that gave the government a reason to consolidate power, and COVID is an exact replica of it. People are dying. There is a health crisis, but they're less interested in fixing the health crisis than they are consolidating power. They're looking to, first it starts with the mask mandate, and now they're talking about vaccinations and all these other things that are nobody wants a mass vaccination. Nobody's interested in that. Our kids are being told they can't go to school. People are being told they can't go to work.
That's a nightmare in its own way.
Yeah, and it's this push for power. It's this opportunistic moment where they jump at where they see a crisis. The good old quote. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And it's like it couldn't be any more true. It could not be any more true.
And that's how they're living it right now. It is really scary, and I want to see an end to wearing masks. I'm okay with wearing masks indoors, where there's going to be a lot of people, but outside, I don't think so. And I also think, though, the people who are at risk, they're the ones that need to watch out for themselves.
Absolutely.
So if I have COPD, if I'm diabetic, I have cancer, it's I know I got to be careful. I got to watch out. And that's my responsibility. That's not anyone else's responsibility to take care of me.
No, and it's not about, a lot of people can misinterpret that and be like, oh, you don't care about other people.
Right.
And it's not about not caring about other people, but I think as a whole, and you see this everywhere. You see it financially. You see it, you see it all through society, where we've come to this point where everybody's responsible for everybody else. And that it's this push towards collectivism, and this country was founded on the principles of individualism, where everybody looks out for themselves, and that's not in a way like I'm going to step on you to get ahead, but you were responsible for your own affairs, your own health, your financial well-being. You were responsible for your time, stuff like that. And now it's not everybody else's issue that you didn't save up for college and you think college should be free. It's not everybody else's issue that you make very poor choices when it comes to your health and you're obese.
Right.
That's that's not your problem. If I put myself at risk to die of COVID because I'm 150 pounds overweight.
That's principles.
And
liberty is a principle.
That can easily be mistaken as being insincere, and that's not what it's about. But there's this, it's a cultural thing that is far too common. We've got to learn to harden up a little bit, and that goes for, I think that goes for everybody. You know what I mean? It's not society's responsibility to baby you and to take care of you and to coddle you, and it's certainly not the government's job.
Right.
It is your responsibility, and it's in that same sense, it's your responsibility to look out for those around you. But that starts with you. It starts with you, and then it starts with your family, and then it starts with your community, and then it starts with your and those spheres of influence grow. But you can't take care of those around you, and you can't take care of the community around you if you're not taking care of yourself.
Right. And that's my problem with progressivism, or liberals and Democrats today, is that their first instinct is to look outside to the system and to look outside to the group of people or the government to help, as opposed to taking a look at our own lives and saying, you know what, there's 1,000 ways I can improve my own life right now. Mm-hmm. And this would help everyone in poverty today, if you ask me. It's like, don't worry about what the government can do for you. Don't wait for them. Think about what you can do for yourself right now. And if you actually give it a thorough look, there'll be a lot of things you can do.
It's a sense of entitlement.
Right, and that's why I always look to my own life first, because I don't want to wait for the government to help me. I don't want to wait for someone else to help me. I'm the only person that can really help me. And I think that's the right way, though. It's the best way to get results.
We've lost that somewhere along the way. That was once a founding principle of this country, and a lot of other places in the world understand that a lot better than we do.
Sure,
they understand. You don't sit around and wait for your check from the government, because in a lot of these places those checks never come.
Sure,
you know what I mean. So they've learned to be self-reliant, and we see it with a lot of immigrants. These people are hard workers.
And they work harder than a lot of Americans, most of them.
And that's because they understand the opportunity that they've been given to come here, where their hard work can give them amazing rewards. And that's not a curse. That's a blessing. Like, to be given the reins and be put in control of your own life is
it's amazing.
It's a marvelous thing. It's incredible. There's nothing more free about that. But somehow it's been spun as that's a bad thing, or that's a selfish thing, or that's the wrong way of doing things. And the criticism is always, oh, well, you don't care about people. And it's no. That's a cop out. That's a very easy way to throw a criticism. Right. It's a straw man fallacy.
Sure. A lot of the ways people try to help others, though, in fact, doesn't help them at all. It just makes them makes everything worse.
See it with the welfare system.
It's like the way a parent can overprotect and coddle a child. That doesn't help them. You might think it does. You might have all the right intentions, but it backfires and does the exact opposite. And this is not to say that governments and other systems, they can have flaws, absolutely. I'm not saying they can't. But I just choose to look to what I can do first. That's my circle of influence, what I can do. Mm-hmm. Not what the government can do, because I'm not going to wait years for legislation to be passed or whatever it would be for me to get help through them. That's not the way to go.
And one day that's not going to be there. Even if they give you your your $600 extra a week, mm-hmm. That doesn't just go on forever. You know. If people who get comfortable in that scenario get real comfortable with that $600 a week or whatever it is, but that 600 quickly becomes 4 and quickly becomes 2.
It's dwindling now, right?
Yeah, you see it right now. The perfect example, but it is. It's a good example is when you have very successful parents, right? Very wealthy parents, who worked hard to get to where they do, and they spoil their kids with everything and anything, and their kids turn out being little shitheads.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like because they never understood what it means to earn, and I don't mean earn in a financial sense, but to earn your way through life.
Right. This way, greatness skips a generation a lot of times, because, like you said, they get spoiled, they get coddled, mm-hmm. and they don't learn to appreciate hard work, right? Yeah. But the person who generates the wealth, the person who makes it on their own, they understand what it took to get it. They understand the hard work, and so they appreciate it. That's the big thing.
it's laughable because it happens all the time, you know, and you know, we kind of do it to ourselves.
But struggles can be good in some ways too. That's the other thing I think people forget. It's like the calm sea never made a skilled sailor. So we gain things, we gain strength to overcome a difficult life. We gain from the struggles we go through, and that's priceless.
My life has been a series of struggles. Most of them I've done to myself. You know, I shot myself in the foot numerous times. But through those struggles, it made me better.
Absolutely.
Every time I messed up, every time I screwed my life up, set myself back, you know, did something stupid, it was an opportunity to get better. You know what I mean? And I think it's necessary. You know what I mean? Like I love these people who are well off and don't spoil their kids. Whose kids I have a couple friends.
I think Jackie Chan said that.
You actually stole the thought out of my head. You know, his son isn't getting his money. You know, he's got to earn his own living, and it's like that's an awesome thing because that kid will be just fine. Mm-hmm. You know, he will be just fine.
Sure.
You know, because that's what it's all about. It's about earning your way. You know?
Sure.
And I think that's something that we really need to get back to, as a country and as a society. You know,
I agree 100%.
It's very important.
Absolutely. So is there anything else that you'd want to talk to the audience about or let them know, or currently what's going on here?
No, we're kind of at the boring part, you know, because we're open. Well, we've been open, but gyms are allowed to be open, and the country is opening. But I do have to say, and this is something I was going to speak on my social media about, just because things are open doesn't mean that everybody's out of the water yet. So make sure you're still supporting small businesses. You know, restaurants, they're open. They're open at 25% capacity. Go out and eat. Go order some food.
Tip well.
Help these people out because they are far from out of the water. And you know, and it's I had a woman come in the other day. She broke down in tears. She thanked us for what we did and came to buy a T-shirt and stuff like that. And she was telling me about her small business, you know, and she's been open from day one. But her business is dying because of the fear that people still have. That's a result of sort of media hype and stuff like that. You
Sure.
know, her business includes going into people's homes.
Oh.
You know, and she said she's lost 75% of her business.
A lot of these businesses are open. They're on their last legs, though.
Yes. So don't forget about the small businesses in your community. Don't forget about helping them out. You know, go out, especially if you're fortunate enough to have earned a steady income
Absolutely.
through all this. Spread it out. It'll come back to you, I promise.
And that's the libertarian argument anyway, right? Take care of your fellow community members, family members, so the government doesn't have to. Yeah. That's their whole principle. And I don't think enough libertarians and wealthy folks really actually live up to that. They don't take care of their own community as much as they should. Yeah. Like, think of all the things Mr. Bezos could do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't.
Yeah.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But he does.
And that's it. Yeah, that's an important thing to walk away with is don't think that this is over. Because it's not. You know, the damage that has been done to small businesses, even if it wasn't a fatal blow then and there, a lot of these people are still struggling to survive, and still trying to dig themselves out of a very deep hole that they didn't put themselves in.
Sure.
You know, this is not about bailing out anybody. This is about supporting people who made it through the storm. You know, but their ship is still taking on water.
Sure.
You know, so don't forget about that, and don't forget about how powerful your dollar is. You know, when you choose to spend your dollar, choose wisely.
Absolutely.
Oh my God,
well, Ian, thanks for coming on the show, brother. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you're doing here too. I think it's going to help a lot of small businesses, and like I said, to all the people watching this too, don't hesitate to help your small businesses, your restaurants, the people that didn't get helped by the government in any way. Don't be afraid to spend your dollars. Leave your comments below and what you thought about this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching.
Ooh, cool. It's fucking flies. Where did they come from? There was like one, and then there was like 10.